Hello and welcome to the first episode, iteration, whatever you want to call it, of Politics in Review. And my goal with this channel is really just to give the average person on YouTube a dose of American politics, and hence the name Politics in Review, right? So let's just jump right into it. So you may or may not have heard, but there's this little known election coming up in America tomorrow. I think it's known as the presidential election. And yeah, it's a pretty big deal. It happens once every 4 years. And this year, it's between this guy known as Donald Trump on the Republican side and someone known as uh, Joe Biden on the Democratic side. No, but seriously, all jokes aside, the day to vote in America is tomorrow. And regardless of which side you support, it's impossible to deny that there's a lot on the line. So I thought I would just go through and list some of the major policy positions for Donald Trump and for Joe Biden. And to be honest, if you're watching this the day before you're gonna vote, you're probably not gonna change your mind this close to the election. And who really is undecided at this point? But you know what? It's never bad to be more informed about who you're voting for. And you know what? Maybe you will change your mind after hearing what I have to say. So let's just talk about the two candidates really quick. Starting with Donald Trump, if you go to his website, one of the first things you see is that he has a tab for promises kept. So if you click on that, he claims that he's made promises, he's kept promises, and you can go through and he lists a lot of different policy positions, everywhere from law and justice to land and agriculture, right? So there's a wide array of what he stands for. So if we just delve a little deeper into what exactly he believes, you'll see that Trump is tough on immigration. I mean, I don't think that's something that's not very well known. That's one of his key talking points, right? Build a wall on the campaign trail was one of the main things he said. And in many respects, he was able to get that done. And he says that on his website, that he was able to build a wall, at least in some respects, get rid of DACA or parts of DACA, which would defend children born in the United States of illegal immigrants. And ICE has made many arrests. So there's no doubt that Trump has made immigration much stricter in America. The question is really, do you think that's a good idea or not? And do you think that his tough stance on immigration is really a good thing for America? And that's really the question. And if you actually look at like the data and you see how much illegal immigration has gone down, you'll see that sure, it's gone down a little bit, but it's not a crazy amount, and that's for you to judge. Do you think that's warranted or not? And that's something that you should keep in mind when going to the polls. So moving on to economy and jobs, you'll see on his campaign website that Trump really touts his tax reform, which he claims has really helped the middle class of America. And if you look at what he's written, you'll see that that's really what he emphasizes. More how how the tax breaks have helped the middle class, and not so much how it has helped the rich. Well, of course, he would not want to emphasize that. And then if you keep on scrolling down, you'll see that he touts economic growth in America and higher employment rates in America, which were in fact increasing until unfortunately the COVID pandemic hit. But of course, that's not all Trump's fault. Much of that was beyond his hand. At least the COVID pandemic hitting America, of course, he could not have controlled that. But if you look at the graphic on the screen right now, and you look at how Trump's tax cuts helped the American middle class versus the tax cuts of Ronald Reagan, very probably the most respected conservative in American history, right? And if you look at the two tax cuts, you'll see that, of course, both of them did help the rich in America, as tax cuts will do. But you'll see that Reagan's tax cuts actually helped those at the lower income levels in America the most, while you'll see that Trump's tax cuts have actually not helped many lower class Americans, despite how he wants to uh, point to it in another way, right? Shed his tax cuts in another light as something that is really helping the middle class, where in fact that's not necessarily true. So if you go on from taxes and you go to the Trump website and you go to the section on trade and foreign policy, you'll see that at the top of the page, it talks about some of the more minor moves taken by Trump, uh, like different trade agreements that he has brokered. He claims trade agreements for America, right? For example, NAFTA, which he altered. But I mean, I think everyone would agree on both sides of the aisle that Trump's biggest foreign policy maneuver while president was definitely tack or was trade war with China, right? Tariffs, putting tariffs on China, and the tariffs went both ways. And it seems inconclusive about whether or not these tariffs were really a good thing for America or a bad thing for America. And that's something that we will likely have to wait and to see the effects. But really, the tax or the tariffs on China go back to a bigger issue of which side you're voting for, Trump or Biden. Because Trump's tax cuts are really, or Trump's, I keep on saying tax cuts, Trump's tariffs are really, really indicative of his desire to get tough on other countries. Whereas if you look at Biden's stance on foreign policy, you'll see that he's much more open to working with other countries, right? Diplomacy, maybe before starting a tariff war on China, right? And again, this goes beyond tariffs. If you look at Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general that Trump killed, a Biden administration would be very unlikely to do similar moves. And whether or not you think that's a good thing, that's for you to decide. But it's just important to note that a Trump or a Biden presidency, rather, would definitely be more geared towards diplomacy, whereas a Trump presidency would be more geared towards America first, right? So moving now to Joe Biden's website, Joe Biden, much like President Trump, lists lots of his policy positions on his website, but you'll see that Joe Biden really puts a lot more emphasis on COVID 19 and his response to COVID 19. Trump really doesn't, almost doesn't even mention the coronavirus on his website. It seems like something that he wants the Americans to almost forget about. But if you look at Joe Biden, it's a much bigger deal, and he speaks a lot about healthcare. He speaks about protecting the Affordable Care Act and making the American healthcare system less difficult to navigate. What exactly does that mean? It's hard to say. Of course, he is speaking in generalities, right? Joe Biden has not been president, so we can't necessarily judge him on his actions, unlike Trump. So that puts him as at a much easier position for him, right? Like more quality healthcare is another point he lists. But exactly what that means, we'll have to see until if he's elected. Stand up to uh, the pharmaceutical companies is another issue. Again, what exactly does that mean? Hard to say. And his last point, ensure healthcare is a right uh, guaranteed to everyone. He suggests something similar to Medicare, available to all Americans um, if they so choose. But it's important to note that unlike Bernie Sanders and some other more liberal Democrats, Joe Biden does not want to create a single payer healthcare system. Uh, he wants to create a government run healthcare system which Americans can choose to opt into, but will not be forced to opt into, right? Okay. And now, if you move on to immigration, you'll see that Biden's plan is completely different than Donald Trump. Unlike Donald Trump, who wants to be like very tough on immigration, Joe Biden, quite the opposite, wants to be much more welcoming to immigration in America. Just completely different philosophy, right? It's important. He notes that America will still safeguard its security, of course, but still will not have the tough stance that Trump has on immigration. Again, he makes a bunch of broad claims like modernize America's immigration system, welcome immigrants in our communities, reassert America's commitment to asylum seekers and refugees, tackle the root cause of irregular migration, and implement effective border screening. Again, how will all of those be seen, or lots of those be seen? We still have to see. If Biden becomes president, then we will see. Uh, but again, we don't really know this. But this comes down to the philosophies when you choose who to vote for. Do you want a president to be more open to immigration and more open to immigrant communities, or do you want a president who is more harsh on immigration, less open to immigration communities, and who will take a tough stance on illegal immigration? Even though Trump's stance on illegal immigration has not done much to stem the tide of illegal immigration, as we've mentioned earlier. Now, onto the economy, you'll see that Joe Biden's plan revolves almost exclusively around uh, recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic, right? He actually doesn't really talk about much else. He claims that he wants to create millions of good paying jobs and give American working families the tools, choices, and freedom they need to build back better, whatever that means, right? uh, but he does, and if you if you pause the video and read the bullet points, he does give some somewhat specifics, but mainly what he's saying is that he wants to give stimulus money, likely stimulus checks, to the American worker, the American family, the American small business, and the American institutions, right? In order to ensure that there is a quick recovery, economic recovery from this pandemic. Unfortunately, he doesn't give many specifics to his plan, and he doesn't really say what the Biden White House will do after the pandemic. And again, very broad, but we'll have to see until he gets elected, if he gets elected. But one thing that both Joe Biden and Donald Trump really do not talk about is deficit spending. And in fact, that's something that American politics really has not touched on at all in the last 4 to 5 years, ever since Donald Trump has been president. And in fact, as you can see in this graphic here by CNN, Donald Trump's, or the deficit spending of the American government under Donald Trump's presidency has actually been higher than Obama's last few years. And I suspect that if Joe Biden is elected as the next president, the GOP will make this a much greater issue, and they will start to talk about it a lot more. Deficit spending, stay on the lookout, because the American debt is not going away. It's several or many $1 trillion, and it's just continuing to rise. Nearly $1 trillion this year is what it has increased by. And with all the stimulus money given away because of the COVID-19 pandemic, that's likely to increase even more. So you may be thinking to yourself, well, what are the odds of Trump and Biden winning the White House? What is the likelihood that Trump will win, or the likelihood that Joe Biden will win? Well, if you look at 538, probably the most reputable uh, election predictor out there, you'll see that Biden is favored, or actually very favored, to win the election tomorrow. In fact, 538, which compiles all the polling data along with demographic data, and they come up with odds for the election. And they find that Joe Biden has an 89 out of 100 chance to win the election, and Trump has a 10 out of 100 chance. They say there's a 1 out of 100 chance that there will be an electoral college tie. Let's all hope that does not happen, because that would definitely be a nightmare uh, for everyone in America. Uh, I know I can probably hear lots of you screaming at the screen right now. Well, in 2016, everyone said Hillary Clinton would win. What if the same thing happens? What if Donald Trump just upsets like he did in 2016? Well, there are some things different from 2016, but it's important to note that, of course, Joe Biden can still win. But 538, the same website, in 2016 actually gave Donald Trump a much better chance of winning the White House, a 28.6% chance, nearly a 30% chance, and it gave Hillary Clinton a 70% chance, right? So 7 in 10 for Clinton, 3 out of 10 for Trump. So Trump's odds are definitely not as good as they were 4 years ago, but it is impossible to deny that he has a shot. And maybe you want to make sure that he has a better shot, or maybe you want to make sure that he has less of a shot. That's why it's important that tomorrow you vote if you have not voted already. And that is why I'm making this video, to just inform everyone on the election, the candidate stances, and hopefully, if not already voting, convince at least one person to vote this year. So, have a great night. I hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully there are more videos to come. I'll see how this goes. Maybe there will be an episode 2, an iteration 2. When it'll be coming, I don't know. Will this be a weekly series, a monthly series? That will have to be seen. But have a great night, have a great day, and regardless of the outcome of the election, we're all Americans, right? So just keep that in mind.